I watched a video of a recent lecture by the Dalai Lama on the art of happiness that he presented at Klagenfurt, Austria. Here's the web address, although you may find it easier to simply Google Dalai Lama and the Art of Happiness video. I was struck by how his view on happiness is consistent with two streams of psychology: cognitive behavioral therapy and theory of mind. In this video, I'm going to use excerpts from the talk to look at the connections. I trust that someone official will let me know if using these excerpts is illegal or improper. First, let's briefly turn to the batting order, as it were, of the ideas presented. This is my condensation of the Dalai Lama's prescription for happiness. All animals desire more peace, more calm. Sensory level experience is temporary. Mental level of experience remains longer. Disturbance of emotions occurs at the mental level. If we can watch an angry mind, the intensity of that anger decreases. Warm-heartedness equals a concern for others. An individual's happy life depends on the entire community. Humans survive through human affection. Each child learns affection through mother's love. Everyone has the seed of compassion from their mother's love. Concern for only self increases distance from others, loneliness, fear, and distrust. A mind too involved with emotions leads to a biased mind. In order to know reality fully, we must have a calm mind. Four of these items strike me as consistent with cognitive behavioral psychology. Broadly speaking, cognitive behavioral psychology contends that our experiences in life are not so much governed by the actual experiences themselves as how our minds conceptualize the meaning of those experiences. A boy is walking in his neighborhood when he comes across a large dog that he doesn't know. The dog's behavior is not threatening. In fact, the dog just stands there. But he is a big dog. This particular boy was bitten by a dog when he was younger. This boy feels afraid. Okay, let's rewind the sequence. A second boy takes a walk in the same neighborhood and comes across the same dog. But this boy had a large dog when he was younger. This boy experiences joy. Same dog, same experience with the dog coming into the boy's visual view, but a completely different experience. In his talk, the Dalai Lama contends that the sensorial level of experience has less of a lasting impact on our lives than how we think about that sensorial experience. My understanding is that the Dalai Lama is suggesting that a lack of happiness stems not from experience, but how we mentally process experience. What is more striking is the clinical implications the Dalai Lama draws from this observation. Using anger as an example of a destructive emotion, if we can simply watch the angry part of our mind, that is, mentally step back and watch the part of us that is experiencing anger, the intensity of that anger will decrease. A classic combination of cognitive therapy, where not our emotions, we can step back and observe our feeling self, with behavioral therapy, exposure therapy in this instance. The other thread that connects this talk is, in my opinion, even more interesting. One of the most compelling lines of inquiry in contemporary neuroscience is research into mirror neurons and the theory of mind that's developed from that research. Researchers at the University of Parma in the 1980s and 1990s recorded which neurons fired when a macaque monkey reached for a piece of food. They then noticed that a subset of the same neurons fired off in the monkeys when the monkeys watched a human reach for a piece of food. Now this is startling. Why would the sequential neural instructions from moving an arm or hand muscles fire off when watching another animal move its arm? And not just any arm movement, but only when the other animal picked up a piece of food. The monkeys were not just reacting to hand and arm movements in other animals, the monkeys appeared to be assigning intentionality to the movements of other animals. When the researcher moved his arms and hands but did not attempt to grasp a piece of food, the neurons in the monkey's brain did not fire. One could argue, as Francis Crick later did, that these researchers have suggested a solid empirical basis for consciousness. The amazed researchers wrote up their findings and sent them off to the journal Nature, which promptly rejected the piece because of a lack of general interest. Luckily, it didn't end there. For a more detailed discussion of mirror neurons as a plausible basis for the study of consciousness, look up V.S. Ramachandran's essay, Self-Awareness, The Final Frontier. This is the link, but if you Google Self-Awareness, The Final Frontier, you can find the essay without having to know how to spell Ramachandran. You might also Google TED, The Neurons That Shaped Civilization, for a 7.5-minute video overview by Ramachandran. These mirror neurons form the basis for an avenue of research called theory of mind. Theory of mind posits the ability to recognize mental states of others as separate from one's own. This ability allows us to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and imitate what they do. When I was a kid, we had a term for this, and it wasn't theory of mind. It was called monkey see, monkey do. As you can tell from the somewhat pejorative flavor of the statement, this wasn't considered higher-order learning. And yet, if you go back 75,000 or 100,000 years ago, there was an explosion in human learning that may well be tied to mirror neurons. There were rapid improvements in tool building, and those skills spread rapidly across human populations. It is thought that advances in language and in shelter form the basis for culture. It may well not be too grandiose to say that Homo sapiens suddenly became human about 75,000 years ago. What if this quantum leap in human development is tied to the novel use and further development of mirror neurons that exist in other mammals, particularly in primates? Then monkey see, monkey do learning isn't trivial. It's revolutionary. Before monkey see, monkey do learning was primarily genetic. A gene mutates here, a positive adaptation happens there. Darwinian learning can take hundreds of thousands of years to accomplish. Monkey see, monkey do learning is efficiently passed down from parents to children and laterally across populations from neighbor to neighbor. But it's more revolutionary than that. Because you see, it's not just monkey see, monkey do. It's monkey see, monkey feel. Mirror neurons form a biological basis for empathy. Let's return to Ramachandran for an example. You see someone pricked in the arm with a pin. The mirror neurons in your brain fire off exactly as if you were being poked with that pin. Fortunately, the sensory neurons in your arm send up a message to your brain saying, "Don't worry, you aren't actually being poked with this pin." And the net result is that you experience an abstract representation of the other person's pain, called empathy. In his work with patients with phantom limbs, Ramachandran discovered something startling. When patients who had their right arm amputated saw a person's right arm being pricked with a needle, they didn't feel empathy. They experienced actual pain. The explanation for this is straightforward. Because their arms had been amputated, there were no sensory impulses being transmitted from the skin up to the brain saying, "Actually, you're not being pricked by that needle." Without the inhibitory signal from the skin, the patient's mind believes the faux pain signal that's created by the mirror neuron and generates the sensation of pain. The staggering implication that Ramachandran draws from this example: the only thing separating you from the rest of the world is your skin. Let's take this back to the Dalai Lama's talk. In his talk, the Dalai Lama contends that our happiness is directly linked to our ability to generate warm-heartedness, a concern for others. In other words, our ability to empathize with others. He contends that our happiness depends on our relationship with each other. Let me quote him here at about 55 minutes and 39 seconds into the speech when he states, quote, "We are a social animal. Each individual's happy life depends on the rest of the community. So others are the ultimate source of our own happy life." End quote. In terms of theory of mind, our own happiness is contingent upon how richly developed our mirror neuron feedback network is. If this feedback network isn't developed, and we are concerned only with ourselves, the net result will be a life that creates social distance between ourselves and the rest of the world, which creates loneliness, fear, and distrust. The Dalai Lama contends that we all have the seed of compassion, because that seed is sown by the affection, and indeed by the very act of nursing, that is provided by our mothers. I would note that severe neglect and certain autism spectrum disorders raise doubts about the "everyone has these seeds," but still think the broad theory is compelling. What follows is a 7-minute and 45-second excerpt of 5 portions of the Dalai Lama's larger talk that address these points.
So I think another sort of point, real disturbance of emotions, not sensorial level. Sensorial causing that, but real sort of disturbance sort of emotions mainly come from mental level. So now, in order to achieve calm or happy life, calm mind is very essential. So since real source of disturbance come from mental level, so we have to deal with mental level. Now here, firstly, pay more attention about our inner values, inner world. I think quite sufficient now. External world, we have quite good knowledge. But inner world, even you see within this skull, the small space, we're exploring external space, but sometimes we not yet fully cover about our inner space here. So it is important, useful, to think more about our mind, about our emotion itself. The other day I mentioned, once the emotion develop, then try to watch emotion by another sort of mind. Then it automatically, the intensity of the negative emotion subside. For example, when you feel strong anger, then try to look at anger or at mind. We can do that. We have that ability. Try to watch the mind which is dominated by anger. As soon as you watch that, the intensity of the anger reduces. So like that. So it's quite interesting to look inward about mind. Now the moral ethics very much related with warm-heartedness. Warm-heartedness means sense of concern of others' well-being. Consider others also just like me, truly human brothers, sisters. They also want happiness, do not want suffering. We are social animal. Each individual's sort of happy life depends on the rest of the community. So the rest of the community or others is ultimate source of your own happy life. So taking care of their right, once that kind of sort of thinking there's no room exploitation, bully, cheating, lie, because you respect them. So ultimately warm-heartedness, sense of concern of others' well-being is the key thing. This we already equipped from childhood. As soon as we were born, we received maximum affection from our mother. This biological factor, the affection already there because we survived by human affection, mainly mother's affection with mother's milk. So that experience is really deeply absorbed in our body, in our sort of genes or bloods. So everybody have that sort of seed already there. Physical health also very important, this warm-heartedness, because the scientists say, some scientists say, constant fear and anger, hatred, actually eating our immune system. So fear comes, extreme self-centered attitude, just me, me. Then look this side, little fear. That kind of sort of mental attitude makes you yourself distance from other. As a result, this side, fear. This side, distrust. Result, lonely. Sense of insecurity. That brings fear. Fear translates frustrations, anger. So, recent our scientific meeting, seminar, we have that sort of slogan, healthy mind, healthy body. Healthy mind, very much related with healthy body. Okay. Then at the beginning I mentioned realistic. In order to carry realistic approach, we must know the reality fully. In order to know the reality fully, our mind must be calm. If our mind too much sort of involve emotions, then our mind becomes biased. Through that way, you can't see the things objectively. So therefore, in order to carry investigation objectively, our mind should be calm, should be neutral. So here also, warm-heartedness have important role. So therefore, in education field also, I think student, constant fear and uncomfortable way, I think that's one hindrance of learning. Fresh, enthusiasm, happy, then you can learn better. So I think every level of human life, and experts, professions, so your mind more open, calm, you can carry your professional works, including politicians or everything. You see, then really the successful very much depend on realistic approach. Realistic approach, again, finally related with our mental level, calm mind. That, again, related with self-confidence, open heart. So that's the secular ethics.